If you were premier today, would you keep the provincial fuel tax cut in place despite it being scheduled to expire?
I just had a conversation with some supporters, and I would say this: I'd make that permanent.
Today, Wally Daudrich is joining us. He's running for leader of the PC Party of Manitoba. That means he could be potentially the next premier of Manitoba. So we invited him on to talk about what that could mean for taxpayers and what his plans are should he be elected leader. So to start off, Manitoba has been through some pretty rough budgets recently, costing taxpayers billions of dollars in deficits and debt interest payments. If you were premier, how soon would you balance the budget?
Well, thank you for having me here today. Before we go into that, I just would like to say one thing. And that one thing is I'm the only conservative that's running in this race. As far as my first mandate as premier, obviously 4-year plan, I would have the budget balanced within 2 years. That's giving me a little bit of leeway. You always want to manage your expectations, and having expectations a little bit lower than what would actually happen is often a good thing. So we would start with 2 years and maybe sooner.
Okay. How would you look to do that? What type of things would you see as places to cut costs in the government?
For the better part of my adult life, our province has seen shrinking revenue coming from our resource extraction industry. And we have tried to repair healthcare, infrastructure, law and order using Band-Aid plans with limited income. So like I am a businessman, I came out of COVID actually coming out very strongly with 50% greater revenue. It's not to say that COVID wasn't hard on our tourism segment, but the reality is we grew our business by 50%, and so we were able to spend a lot more money, and that's what would be my plan with our province, our provincial budget. The way that you fix problems is by growing the economy and growing our budget. So I believe wholeheartedly that within a couple of years that I can have billions of dollars of investment coming into Manitoba. And it's clear that for the past few years, especially under the present administration, that we haven't had a administration that is pro-business, wanting to attract private investment into Manitoba. And I know how to attract private investment, and I will go full force into that.
Okay, so kind of continuing on that topic then. So in Manitoba, since 2019, the cost of paying government bureaucrats has increased by about 20%. What would you do about the cost of government bureaucracy?
When we came out of COVID, we had a good workforce, a strong workforce. And there was some attrition that occurred during COVID, people that naturally they moved on to other fields. But we have a great workforce. And I believe here in Manitoba as well, we have a great workforce that are civil service. But under the present budget restrictions, what we have to do is we have to make our expenditures commensurate with our revenue. So on the short term, I believe just using attrition would bring our civil service down to a level that would be commensurate with our revenue. But I would say this, that very shortly afterwards, that our provincial revenue will grow exponentially like it has. As I mentioned earlier in my business, I believe we can grow that very quickly. But you're right. As far as numbers is concerned, we have one of the larger civil services in Canada, and it's not appropriate for the size of economy that we have. But if you grow the economy, you actually shrink the percentage of outlay, budgetary outlay that goes towards maintaining our civil service. So we would grow the economy. We would use the extractive industry primarily, but there would be other segments of the economy with reduced regulation and red tape, and increasing the private capital coming into Manitoba. One thing I would note as well is that we don't have an international trade office. I think you look at other provinces, I'm going to say Alberta and Saskatchewan, they're aggressively searching out opportunities to bring to Manitoba. And if you want to turn a negative into a positive, you could say that the decades of NDP mismanagement in the past 40 years has created great opportunities. Great opportunities that I would look at as ripe fruit falling from a tree. And I want to be the leader with my grassroots supporting me and Manitoba, the leader that would actually go out and gather that fruit. I think it's high time. And I think you can see the pendulum swinging, and you can see the North American economy and the public and at large wanting to support greater investment opportunities. And I just want to take advantage of that.
Right. So speaking of mismanagement, then, the province of Manitoba used to have much more robust balanced budget legislation than it currently does, that saw a cabinet minister's pay cut if they failed to balance the budget. But in the last couple of years, it's been neutered. What do you think should happen to politicians who fail to balance the budget?
Excuse me. In my business, we run what we call a meritocracy. If you do the things that I want you to do, guess what? You're going to go well. Things are going to go well, and you'll stay a long time with us. If you don't do the things that I ask you to do, then you're not going to stay in that position for very long. As far as policy development in government, I would look at all aspects of that, and I have a number of people that I would bring in with me that represent solid, conservative, pro-business principles. And again, I want to reiterate that I'm the only conservative in this race.
Okay, in relation to that one then, so the current government recently increased politician welfare by increasing the amount of a candidate's elections expenses that can be reimbursed by taxpayers from 25 to 50%. How would you explain to taxpayers that are unwilling to pay for politicians' campaigns in the future?
I wouldn't have to explain, because I would take a playbook out of Brian Pallister's playbook and say, yeah, we're going to roll that back. I don't believe that we should be giving subsidies, taxpayer subsidies, to political groups. I believe that they have to go to the public based on their own merits and on their own job performance, and create that revenue that those parties need. And that's where our party will, under my leadership, will see a house cleaning of sorts, where I want to put forward a full audit that our party would be subjected to make sure that we are on the right path, as you say, accountability to our grassroots people, our party members, and eventually the support and the trust of the people of Manitoba.
I think taxpayers are probably going to like that answer. So to continue on, Manitoba families are paying more in provincial taxes than similar families in Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, and British Columbia. What would you do to provide tax relief to Manitobans?
Again, and I want to say also, I like taxpayers. I'm one of them, and I contribute in a big way. In our hometown of Churchill, we employ about 10% of the population. And we have a significant portion of the land base in Churchill. We contribute in a big way to sales tax, property tax, and I'm going to say about 15 different accounts that we have to pay each month, and as well as quarterly payments that we're responsible for. So I understand the burden that the taxpayer carries. There would be a multi-pronged approach. And again, I would bring a team with me that will forensically look at each aspect of government to reduce waste and red tape. And I would do so aggressively. We see some of that happening south of the border. And I want to see the same sort of approach to government that I would bring from my business experience. Again, we grew our revenue by 50%. During COVID, we were actually investing in our business. And I would say also that the president of our Travel Manitoba, our Crown Corporation promoting tourism, encouraged me during that time. He said, if we want to get out of this, we have to invest in the future. And that's what I did. We actually bought a $7 million cruise boat during that period. And we're reaping the benefits of that investment even now.
Right. Okay. So then on that same topic of tax cuts, if you were premier today, would you keep the provincial fuel tax cut in place despite it being scheduled to expire?
I just had a conversation with some supporters, and I would say this: I'd make that permanent.
Okay. I think tax
We'll find the revenue by growing the economy, but we'll make that permanent. Absolutely.
I think taxpayers like to hear that one as well. So we were talking about it quite a bit before jumping into the ring of politics. You've had a lot of experience in business, as you've talked about. So what is something that you would do to help Manitoba businesses stay competitive? You've kind of touched on it already, but compared to the rest of the country, what would you do to help businesses in Manitoba grow and flourish?
Okay. I would make reference to this that there are unseen forces or unseen principles that all human beings abide by, but those principles guide our lives. And I like to say this, that I like to look at an issue and I mentally take things apart in my head. So I like to say that I'm not a critical person, but I'm a critical thinker. And so we need that in business, and we need that in leadership. And one of the things that I would bring to leadership is no more tepid attitudes. I would be aggressive. I want to make Manitoba a place where billions of dollars of investment will come to this province and it will want to stay. And I would make reference to history. If you look back before the arguably populist push of the early NDP, which did include people from every part of the spectrum, but we used to have a business climate here in Manitoba where a lot of the large corporations actually parked their flag and their head office. And when Howard Pauley and others of that political stripe came in, a lot of those head offices, they packed up their luggage, their suitcases, they loaded their trailers, and they went off to Calgary, Alberta. And that is the legacy of the NDP here in Manitoba, is that they have put such a tax burden and such a complex bureaucracy in place that it actually makes business think twice about expanding and initially even coming into the province. So the really big opportunities, yes, we can bring investment here. And I would want to also say, from the fiscal point of view, Brian Pallister was probably one of the best premiers we've had in my lifetime because of his attitude towards taking care of the taxpayers' dollar. It was very precious to him, and we would take that same attitude that every dollar that we spend has to have an end game involved. Why are we spending that dollar? What are the benefits in the end? And that's not to say that we need to spend a lot more money in infrastructure, because we have a $9 billion infrastructure deficit right now. And that's not to say that we wouldn't spend more money on healthcare, because healthcare has been declining here in Manitoba for 2 decades. And that's not to say that we don't need to spend more money on law and order, because unfortunately the NDP, in their time in power, has not necessarily shrunk the budget. I think they have done that, but through the devaluation of our dollar as time goes on, we're still spending 1990s dollar value on law and order that needs to be law and order money from the 2020s. So that budget also needs to be increased so that businesses, especially in our capital city, can say, I feel strong that I can invest and I can expand in the city and have the same opportunities that other large Midwestern cities would provide to their businesses. And we have the richest backyard in Canada.
Right. But often when politicians talk about helping businesses, you've laid out a lot of things here. Unfortunately for taxpayers, sometimes that means corporate welfare. According to the Fraser Institute, the Manitoba government spends about $500 million a year giving handouts to corporations in Manitoba. What would you do about corporate welfare?
My own business experience is we did not take any government funding throughout the history of our business. We started our business with sweat equity and capital that we had saved, and that's how every business should work. Is capital from that company. I'm very much against bringing in taxpayer subsidies to anybody, especially in the corporate field. The corporate field knows how to take care of itself. It should be based on meritocracy, and I would encourage that direction for all.
So to back up a little bit from the hardcore politics of it all, always see you run an ecotourism business up in Churchill. So what makes you more nervous, getting up and close with a polar bear or tossing your hat in the ring for elected politics?
I can handle polar bears any day of the week. Yeah. Tossing my name in the hat for leadership means large scale exposure of me, my business, my persona. I'm not afraid of that as well because the way I handle myself. I give credit to my parents that raised me. I'm second generation. Both of my parents were immigrants. Matter of fact, displaced persons. My father, his family actually snuck out of the former Soviet Union. They left behind a community that was decimated by government confiscation and frankly, they also came in and shot a number of my family members before they left.
Jeez, wow.
My dad, when he was 11 years old, he said that the Bolshevik soldiers came to the community and to exact tax from my grandfather's farm, which was a few acres in size. And he remembers my grandfather, or his father, telling my grandmother, put all the kids that can't walk into the wheelbarrow and hide in a bush behind the house while I negotiate with the soldiers. They negotiated away their last milking cow. And I would say right now, speaking figuratively, that Wab Canoe right now is negotiating away our last milking cow. There's not going to be much left. I'm going to get in there and we're going to change it around. We'll be aggressive and we'll do it right.
Well, thank you for answering all of our questions. But as a last, is there anything else that you think that taxpayers in Manitoba should know about you before we let you go?
I would say this, that I operate in principle, and I don't want to sound arrogant or in any way, shape, or form in that vein. So I would just say I humbly ask for the support of our membership in our party, because I live and act on conservative principles. And as a leader of our province, I would do the same. I would live and act on conservative principles.
Well, I think that's a good way to end. Thanks for joining me, Wally.
You bet. Thank you for having me.